was in 1976. It was in a room conversation. I asked Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, what is the benefit that the flowers get when you offer them to Krishna or your spiritual master? And Srila Prabhupada replied, every flower you offer to your spiritual master or to Krishna, the plant the flower came from becomes a human being in his next life. Someway Sankirtan began. In Juhu, in 73, when I got there, we had a small temple. Of course, we were living very austere. We can't believe how austere we were living. Anyways, there was this half-moon fence in front of the temple. Inside this fence, there were 14 or 15 Tulsi Devis growing. So one day in the morning, I wasn't aware that the Tulsis were dying. So anyways, one day in the morning walk, Srila Prabhupada asked me, the Tulsis are dying. Why are the Tulsis dying? And I said, I don't know. And I said, I will do some research. So that day I went over to the Tulsis and I started digging around, and I found the termites were eating the roots, and there were ants all around her and everything. So the next morning on the morning walk, I told Srila Prabhupada that the ants and the termites were eating at the roots. And Srila Prabhupada said, you take 1 part lime, 1 part sulfur, and you mix it with 10 parts of water. You sprinkle it all around Tulsi Devi, and the ants will go away. So I started to do that, and then Prabhupada went on his world tour. But while he was gone, all the Tulsis died. So I made some nice beads for myself. I took the fence down, and now there was only dirt there. You know, the Tulsis that were there for the deities, Rasa Rasa Bihari, were gone. So then Prabhupada came back from his world tour, and it was during Guru Puja. I remember it was the 5 ghee lamps, so we were doing the 5 ghee lamps. So I walked up to Srila Prabhupada and gave him his flower, and he said, where are the Tulsis? And I said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, I tried to save them, but, you know, they all left the planet. So I just immediately offered my obeisances and kind of slithered out of the temple without getting chastised in the middle of Guru Puja. So then the next morning, the morning walk was coming out, and Srila Prabhupada stops everybody in front of the big garden that I had done, and I had 54 Tulsi Devis growing in there. Well, Srila Prabhupada asked me, how are these Tulsis doing? I said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, they're doing very well. Because there's all these spider mites and aphids and bugs crawling all over. And he said, you leave the insects alone. Let them eat as much as they want. Who are you to kill them? So in 1975, it was Bhaktisiddhanta's disappearance day, and I was in charge of the kitchen in Bombay. So we were making 108 preparations, you know, for the ceremony. So I made 98 of the 108 preparations. So they were all taken up to Srila Prabhupada, and Gopal Krishna, who was a young brahmachari at that time, he came up to me and said, well, Shankadas, you made all these preparations. You have to come up to Srila Prabhupada and tell him what you made. So I went up with Gopal Krishna, and it was Gopal Krishna, Prabhupada, and myself sitting in the room. And in front of Prabhupada was a table with 108 preparations. So Prabhupada said, what is this preparation? And I told him what it was, and he tasted it. He said, what is this preparation? I told him what it was, and he tasted it. He said, what is this preparation? I told him what it was, and he tasted it. And he said, what is this preparation? He told him what it was, and he tasted it. Then the 5th preparation, he said, what is this preparation? I told him what it was, and he tasted it. And he said, Radharani has prepared this feast. You can go.
Wow.
And then I'll tell you a few chastisements that I got, which are pretty significant. Actually, all the pastimes that I had with Srila Prabhupada have a significant meaning to them. Anyways, one day Mother Palika asked me to go to Buleshwar to buy fruits for Srila Prabhupada. So, you know, I went down to Buleshwar, you know, and I started buying fruits, and then I seen this big pile of oranges. I said, wow, beautiful oranges, Masumbi. So I asked the guy to cut one open, and I tasted it, and it tasted real good, and I figured, wow, these are great. So I bought a whole big bag of oranges for Srila Prabhupada. So I guess it was about 3 days later. I went on a lot of morning walks, and this particular morning walk, it was towards the end of the morning walk, and we were walking, and there was this building, this house on top of this hill at the end of the beach, and the sun was reflecting on the glass windows, and Srila Prabhupada started talking about how the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world like that. And then he said, who has bought me these oranges? So I immediately go running up all puffed up and thinking, oh God, I'm going to get glorified. And I walked up and I said, Srila Prabhupada, I bought the oranges. And Srila Prabhupada said, those oranges are 10th class, just like you. And then he said the reason the oranges were 10th class is because they would pick them during the ripe season, and then they would put them in refrigerators and bring them out when the off-season came, and they would sell them for a high price. Then one time I was asked to make samosas for Srila Prabhupada. So I had this recipe for 5 vegetable samosas. It's a Gujarati recipe. So I grated up all the vegetables, and I made this beautiful filling. It took me a long time to make it. And then I rolled out the puris, and I flipped over the puris, and I made like, a half-moon samosas. They were like this big. So I made 35 of them. And I sent them up to Srila Prabhupada. So a couple days went by, and I'd seen Brahmananda Swami. He was Prabhupada's secretary. And I said, "Oh, Brahmananda, how did Srila Prabhupada like the samosas?" He didn't touch him. So then Harikesh, he was a brahmachari at that time, we were good friends. He said, "Well, why don't you come up and cook lunch with Srila Prabhupada with me?" So we were cooking lunch, and this Indian gentleman had come before we started cooking and had made this big feast because Srila Prabhupada was going to have all these guests come over and eat lunch with him. Then this one man, he had made a whole pile of samosas, but they were the little diamond samosas, the little ones that you get here in India. And they were just sitting there on this plate. So me and Harikesh are sitting there, we were just having a good old time, cooking Prabhupada's lunch, and Srila Prabhupada comes walking in the room. We offer our obeisances, and Srila Prabhupada looked at me and he said, "Did you make these samosas?" I said, "Oh no, Srila Prabhupada, that India I cooked before I was in here came and made them." He says, "You don't know how to make samosas. You don't know how to make footballs." And then Srila Prabhupada looked at Harikesh Swami, he looked at me and said, "You two are expert in messing everything up." And he walked out of the room smiling, and then I served him his lunch for 2 days in a row. So after a while, I was talking with Tamal Krishna one time in the garden, and he said, "Shankadas, you're a gardener, so you should offer Prabhupada a flower every day." So I became Prabhupada's flower boy. Every time I'd see Srila Prabhupada, I would give him a flower. Sometimes he would touch my hand taking the flower. Sometimes he would grab the flower and, start chastising me, or sometimes he would grab it and he would glorify me. He would glorify the flowers. No, he did. He really did. He said, "Mogra is the king of flowers." So I went to Mayapur. Third class, of course, Giriraj was very, reluctant to give anybody, money for anything. So he gave me a third-class ticket on a train to Calcutta. And so by the time I got to Calcutta, they stole my suitcase. They stole my shoes. All I had on was a dhoti and a kurta when I got to the temple. And I was all completely full of dirt from 3 days on the train, because I went the slowest train, and the cheapest way you could go. Anyways, I got to Mayapur finally. So they were coming down from the morning walk, and then Bhavananda Goswami goes up to Prabhupada and says, "Oh, Prabhupada, your gardener from Bombay is here." So Prabhupada didn't say anything, and we went on the morning walk, and we were walking around Mayapur, we went to Bhaktisiddhanta's temple, and we were walking back. And so as we were going back, there's this archway before you get, there was only one building in Mayapur at this time, and there was this archway, and you go into the archway, and on the left-hand side, there were some cows. And I didn't know anything about cows, so I went over and started fooling around with the cows, and everyone was going towards the temple. And then maybe about 500 yards before they got to the temple, Prabhupada stops everybody. He turns around and says, "Shanka, come here." So I go running up and said, "Srila Prabhupada, what would you like?" He says, "I want you to plant trees on both sides of the road here." So Jayapataka Maharaj, 2 Bengali boys, and myself, we went around digging up coconut trees all over Mayapur, and we planted them down that pathway. And today, those coconut trees are giving coconuts. They survived floods and disasters, and they're still going. Je anilo